Welcome to episode number 21 of the YWC Football Talk podcast. Today I am joined from Talkin Giants, Justin Penik. Justin, welcome to the show.
First, I want to thank you for having me on. We've been talking in the Twitter DMs for a couple weeks now. Glad we finally get this rolling, and I'm excited for football season. I'm excited to be on. And we're talking Giants. We're also going to be talking some football in general as well, which gets me very excited.
Yeah, exactly. Like, as you know, Talkin Giants out of the blue. He's a New York Giants fan. It's weird. You're going to have a Patriots fan and a Giants fan coming together for a podcast, but you know what? I am open to talking about any division. And before we get started, the one thing I do have to say this year is I know the Giants' expectations are kind of like not exactly there for playoffs still, but I feel like you guys did have a good draft this year to kind of propel you to be excited for this year, see some flashes, but then also to the road ahead.
No, absolutely. I think what this draft was and what this 2019 NFL draft was for the New York Football Giants is an investment in Daniel and Saquon Barkley, which the last 2 years, I said the 2019 draft. It's 2020, Justin. The 2019 draft was Daniel Jones, 2018 was Saquon Barkley. So it's the two biggest investments that this franchise, those two guys, you could debate the value of a running back, can debate it any week and twice on Sunday that I maybe disagree with that. But regardless, it happened, and now we're here, and we kind of have to deal with it. So that's what this draft was, an investment in the offensive line. You know, Andrew Thomas, best tackle prospect in the draft class. You make an argument, but regardless, he was the best left tackle prospect of this draft class. Shane Lemieux, a couple rounds later in round 5. Shane Lemieux, a guard, maybe he's going to transition to center. He's a mauler, mean street dude, has a lot of play strength. We need that anchor up front. That's been something that's been missing from the Giants the last few years. A guy with a lot of play strength up front in that interior offense. And then Matt Barrett also was taken in round 3, who's hopefully going to maybe a little bit of a project. Maybe the Giants can find somebody in free agency or even this upcoming draft. Because I think round 3 projects aren't necessarily a guarantee to have starting spots, but he also does have some promise as well. So that would be something. If we could walk away from a draft, and maybe even the last 2 years, if we could walk away from 2 years of drafts saying, hey, we found our future left tackle, our franchise left tackle, franchise quarterback, franchise right tackle, all within the first 3 rounds. I think that's pretty impressive. But we shall see in 2020 a huge part in trying to answer the question.
And the other prospect, too, that I know was taken right before the Patriots picked was Xavier McKinney. That's a guy I know a lot of people thought was going to be a first round, but when he fell into the second round, you guys must have been pretty happy with that, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Giant fans will be expecting, especially because we're thinking of our personnel, we're thinking of guys on the team. Jabril Peppers, very much strong safety. Kind of had done it all in his career, including back where he played multiple positions, but the multiple positions he played in college was linebacker and safety. So he wasn't necessarily a deep center field safety. Julian Love. Jabril Peppers was a guy that got hurt later in the year in 2019, and then Julian Love was a guy that's and also played strong. He did a job in the box, made tackles in the backfield. He had 5 for loss in a couple games that he played, which was actually the same as Jabril Peppers, and he had a lot more snaps. So we have a lot of guys that are good in. And Xavier McKinney is also pretty good in the box. He's also very good when he's in towards the intermediate. And he's good when he's covering tight ends. He's good when he's able to move laterally and when he's able to move forward. But when these guys are backpedaling, a Giant, one of the teams last year that allowed big plays over and over again, 30-plus yards down the field, they're one of the worst in the National Football League. 10-plus yards down the field in football stats, they're able to measure that as well. So that's where I'm kind of grabbing this. Terrible allowing big plays in the field. That was the Giants' defense's bugaboo, their pass defense. So I'm going to be looking at guys going to be able to step up in terms of that free safety role. But we're talking about McKinney. You can't grab McKinney there. Even though you might love Antoine Winfield, Ashton Davis in that safety role, McKinney is just such a versatile, valuable talent that they're definitely going to build upon. From Alabama, and we just couldn't ignore it to take him. The metaphor that I used for Xavier McKinney was every rose has its thorn. Thorn is the Giants didn't exactly find their deep set for safety, the guy that's going to go sideline to sideline in terms of defending deep passes down the field. Maybe they didn't get that guy, and Xavier McKinney, he can definitely grow into that role. But the rose is that McKinney and the things that he's strong at and his strong suits of his game, he's going to be very good.
Exactly, and also too, like you said, the Alabama portion of it, just like it has that, gives Giants fans that sense of hope, like that sense of like, hey, this year may not be our year, but like looking ahead, looking forward, there's promise. There's like you guys said, like you making investments with Daniel Jones, who I saw some photos of, looks like he added a little bit of muscle, lost a little bit of weight at the same time too. As we all know, Saquon Barkley's an absolute stud. It's just the only questions I feel like now with the Giants, and also obviously to this year, you're missing Nate Solder, who I know once former Patriot, went to the Giants, got his money, hasn't exactly lived up to expectations, but he is sitting out this year, obviously, because of COVID. We all know the unfortunate health situation with his one son. But all in all, it's just the future's looking bright thing. And then the only questions really still is with with Slayton and Shepard at receiver, but then are you okay with that, or would you rather add something on there?
Oh, yeah. I think for right now, where the Giants are right now, and this is why 2020 is going to be so huge, because of course you want to judge a total team by its win-loss record, but at the same time, we're not fully judging the Giants by the win-loss record. It's a strange place, because I think that's easier said than done right now to say, oh yeah, we're going to judge the Giants by how competitive they are in games. But it'll be December. We may have 4 wins, and we're going to be banging down the door for people to get fired. So who knows? Hindsight's always 2020. But in terms of our wide receivers, I kind of like the combination that we have with Golden Tate, Darius Sterling Shepard, even throw Evan Ingram, and obviously Bart is a part of the passing. Barkley's going to be 60 balls. There's not a lot of backs in the National Football League. I feel like they're more common, but there's still not a ton of running backs in the National Football League that are going to demand that target share that Saquon Barkley does. But it also the quarterback tendencies, and Daniel Jones is more or less a quarterback that he's going to try to push it down the field, check it down the tight ends rather than check it down to the back. But neither there. Let's talk about that receiving core. I like those because they all do their own individual things, and they all do them somewhat well. Darius Slayton, we're hoping he can become the Dez Bryant of this offense. Now, this isn't to say, because Dez Bryant wasn't alpha number 1. I don't think the expectation for Darius Slayton is to be that alpha number 1. But what did Dez Bryant do in Jason Garrett Airport y'all offense? He expanded the field. He had very large yards per catch average at end of each season. So that's what we're hoping Slayton to do. Big plays, like he had 5 catches. He had 5 touchdowns last year of 25-plus yards. We're hoping he can continue to be that big play guy for us. Golden Tate, he's kind of like the Swiss Army knife. He's a yak guy. He's always been a after-catch guy. Now, because his target this year was actually substantially more. Jones was targeting him a lot deeper down the field than his average. So I think as a result, you saw his total down a little bit. He also did miss 4 games due to suspension, but his catch rate in terms of how many catches he was on rate to get for 16 games, that went down compared to his previous years in his career. But he was averaging like 90 catches between his years with the Lions and Bucks. He was going to be nowhere close to the Giants last year. His role changed. He was also kind of a big play guy. But I call him the Swiss Army knife because he's going to do whatever I feel do, where he's not going to be a play guy like Derek Clayton, but he's also not going to be a possession wide receiver like he used to be. But our possession wide receiver that we have now is Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard saw his yards per catch go down from compared to 2017 and 2018. It went down like 2.5, 3 yards, averaging 10 yards per pop. But he also was on pace for 91 catches, which I love. Role. Sterling Shepard is such a smart football player. He finds areas and just sit for Daniel Jones. Him and Golden Tate were actually tied for 10th in the NFC last year for third down catches. And remember, they were on the limited snap counts because Tate missed his game and Shepard missed his own with his concussion issues. So I like the roles that each of them are playing in this offense. No one's number 1. I do think Sterling Shepard may finish the year with the most catches. Darius Slayton may finish the year with the most yards. But they all have clear defined roles. No one's a clear number 1, and I like that for the year.
That's also a good point too, just because I also forgot that Golden Tate was acquired. Thank you for jogging my memory with that. But the one thing you always like to see is like having that kind of not three-headed monster aspect, but the aspect where you're going to get something a little different out of every single guy. And I love Evan Ingram from a fantasy perspective. It's just I hope he can stay healthy for once, because like I love taking him in that like third to fifth round, fourth to fifth round area for fantasy. Mm-hmm. But he's just been plagued with injuries the last couple of years. So if he can stay healthy, he can do good for the Giants, and he can also do good if you're a fantasy. And I only bring in fantasy now because guess what? It's draft season, people.
Yeah. Honestly, I hate to say it, but I've been talking with some of my fantasy friends over at Big Dogs to Eat. Nick Ercolano, they have a Fade Public podcast. They do great over there, and I've been talking with them. And, they know a lot more about injuries than I will. I just say, hey, what's the timetable for this guy? Okay, is it after the X amount of weeks? Okay, he's good. Let's rock and roll. No, because they have to look at fantasies. They have to look at injuries every single year, because guys get hamstring injuries in camp and lower body injuries, stuff like that. Evan Ingram is still playing with that screw in his foot. And the guys typically don't have a lot of success long periods of time when he's screwing his foot. Granted, outside Talkin Giants, I've been talking to a lot of beat reporters, and the Giants aren't necessarily holding him back, and he's looking really, really good. So trust with it. I think if he wasn't looking good and if the Giants were holding him on the line, I think they would stay. And it's also tough because I think even, Joe coming from that Bill Belichick tree, it must be frustrating year in, year out to just know what's happening in camp, because beat reporters aren't allowed to tweet about it, and there's barely any video that's coming out. Is that? And I'm not even going to ask you, because this is something I'm just curious about as the Giants, coming from that same coach tree, Joe Judge's. Is that something that frustrates you year to year as a Pats fan about not being able to see what's happening in camp? Because it's killing me. It is killing me not being able to see and really get those concrete updates from beat reporters.
Yeah, because the one main beat reporter that I do follow is Mike Reese from ESPN, and a lot of the times he'll just point out, like even like right now with Cam Newton, how it's he's looking good here, or what's going on here. The fact that Bill Belichick is so tight-lipped, it's a pro and a con thing. You like it because he's confident, I trust what he's doing, but at the same time too,
right,
you kind of wish you could peek behind the curtain just a smidge, just a little smidge, But like you said, too, yeah, like, fantasy guys know injuries because, like, you just want to know, hey, is he going to be back in 2 weeks? Who do I need to pick up? But then at the same time, too, if Evan Ingram goes out again, it's just trouble from both perspectives.
Yeah, snag up Caden Smith. I snagged up Caden Smith in Giants Patreon draft that we did a couple days ago. I snagged him up in the second to last round. So he's a guy that's a good guy to keep on your bench, because I hate to really say it. If I wasn't a fan, and if I was a regular adult, if I was just talking about fantasy, or if I was just talking about players in general, I would say Greg Smith for not if Evan gets hurt, but when Evan Ingram gets hurt. Because Daniel Jones, he's going to be back to the tight end, come back to the tight end, and also Jason Garrett and Jason Witten had the great connection with the Y option. You're hoping that some of these tight ends can be smart enough, and Daniel Jones can get that chemistry to. Yeah, I'm very excited for whoever's playing at tight end for their potential in this Giants offense this year because of that Jason Garrett connection.
Yeah, no, for sure. And even too, like that's the other big thing to ask, just because obviously we know Jason Garrett's situation in Dallas. He should have been fired a few years ago, but then now that he's with the Giants in an offensive coordinator role, do you feel like he's going to be under pressure because it's kind of like, hey, he's this head coach who didn't really do anything with the Cowboys, now he's with you guys, or do you feel like, hey, it's like how the rest of the Giants' expectations are, where it's if they're at 12 wins, not 12 wins, if they're 4-12 at the end of the season, you're calling for his head, or if you're like say 6-10 or like 6-10 or even 7-9, it's kind of, hey, it's just momentum in the right direction. Like how do you see it personally?
Yeah, I think Jason Garrett has the least amount of pressure on him because he's also playing with a ton of talent. He's really, really playing with a ton of talent. Daniel Jones, and you're hoping, the other guys around Daniel Jones and Barkley may have their own health problems. Don't really know how that offensive line is going to hold up. But at least you have Daniel Jones. At least you have Saquon Barkley you can work with. Even though Barkley had a high ankle sprain for most of the season last year, he still played pretty darn good in those 30 games that he was there. So Garrett has the least amount of pressure on him. Because also, if he does somewhat of an adequate job, this Giant team, especially with the Giants isn't expected to do much, we could be saying sayonara to him, and he could be going to get a head coaching. Maybe it's a little likely, but if the Giants are succeeding to the point where we're rooting for them to succeed, because we're fans, not the Giants 2020 plans because he's a head coach somewhere. In a perfect world, that's how successful we are this year. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what Jason Garrett can do, because I actually did a deep dive on TalkinGiants.com. I like to do deep dives. I've already said a bunch of stats on the show. I'm a big analytics guy. So I'm hearing a bunch of different things about, Jason Garrett's going to come in here and he's going to do the establish the run movement. He's going to continue that establish the run, and which I don't think you can establish the run. And there's a lot of analytical reasons why because passing is just a lot more efficient and it's a passing game, blah, blah, blah. But I was also hearing from some other Cowboy fans that I was talking to, but Jason Garrett as a play caller, and when he was an offensive coordinator from the years of 2000 to 2011, when he was the primary play caller, he was also a few years there where he was the head coach and the play caller, and then he relinquished those duties once 2012 came around. So I heard from the Cowboy fans, but early on when Jason Garrett was the primary play caller, his run rate was somewhat low. So then he was passing the ball somewhat frequently. So I had to take a look for myself. And what I found is that, yes, those Cowboy fans that were telling me that Garrett's rush rate is low and his pass rate was high, especially when you look at things situationally, his first down pass rate, his short pass rate. Typically you want to fall on third and short, but even third and short, his pass rate was somewhat high, his rush rate was somewhat low, but he was also very efficient. I love how efficient he is, because that's where I think this Giants offense is going to make their money this year. We're not going to have Daniel Jones throwing for 4,500 yards and 40 touchdowns. That's just not going to happen. But Daniel Jones can be an efficient passer, where we're talking about, he's working the ball to Shep in the intermediate part of the game. We're throwing the ball to Tate in the intermediate part of the game. He's getting his yard after catch. We're raising the tight end and the wide option, and then every once in a while we're keeping the defense honest by expanding the field with Darius Slayton. That's where the offense is going to thrive, getting early with efficient passing, and then we're going to say partly. So in a way, it's the opposite of established run. You're technically establishing the pass first to get that early lead to be an efficient offense to specifically set up the run after that. It's kind of looking up backwards. Typically people say you have to sets up the pass. I frankly sometimes think it's the opposite. And I think Jason Garrett, based off of his play calling tendency early in his career, I think he may go back to that instead of the past week. But also, who knows? He has had a football team this past decade that has been very run heavy. So I don't know whether he's going to go back to his early days and his early tendencies since he was the play. We're going to stick to the tendencies that his offensive coordinator had with a rush-heavy offense. I'm willing to theorize that it's going to be what he originally did as a play caller with a little bit more heavy, a very efficient offensive roles with both pass and the rush.
Well, that was a lot to take in. The other thing you don't have to worry about too is you don't have to worry about a lot of clapping on the sidelines unless you get the cameras on him. But I also think too that the pressure of him leaving to become a head coach, if he does well, I don't know how many jobs will become available come 2021, just because there's a few coaches I could see getting the axe, but that's like mid-season, like potentially Detroit and Atlanta. Just because I feel like with Detroit, and I'm going to get into this in a second with Judge, but I feel like Matt Patricia's trying too hard to emulate Bill Belichick. Meanwhile, you got a guy in Miami like Brian Flores, who's just taken Belichick mannerisms but has his own style in there. So if Joe Judge can go into New York and be Joe Judge and not try to be another version of Bill Belichick, just use Belichick tendencies to help the Giants progress, that'll play well into his favor, because I know right now in Detroit, the players are not exactly on the same page as Patricia.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things that I think some Giants fans are very worried about, and we're really trying to keep the comparisons about what Patricia and even what McDaniels did a couple years ago too when he was the head coach in Denver. We're really trying to keep an eye on it. We're also going to continue to ask these reporters, hey, talk to your people. Talk to your people from these teams. Talk to your people from New England. Is Joe Judge doing the exact same thing? Talk to your people in Detroit. Is Joe Judge doing the exact same thing as this, where Patricia is totally losing the connection with his players? Now, the good thing about what Judge is doing, and this is a bad thing that Ben McAdoo did a couple of years back. Pat Shermer was pretty healed and he never lost the locker room. It was also clear that Shermer was gone once his end of season came. I don't know, coming off that 11 season, that was just a disaster season after coming off that 11-win season. But what McAdoo did is towards the latter of the 2017, when he becoming the head coach in 2016, he tried to lay down the law, and he didn't do it from day one. He didn't lay down the law from day one. I really do think, and this could go back to what Patricia and his relationship with players. I think especially you get the example of Darius Slay and that relationship in that tenure didn't go well with him in Detroit. There is a difference between, I think, the coach being harping on discipline, but also respecting their players, and then also maybe a coach harps on discipline, but does not respect their players. I can imagine behind closed doors, Patricia can be a hard ass and only a hard ass. But I think Judge, and this is all Coach. This is all the only thing that we've been able to see Coach Judge do is speak in front of a conference. But some of the things that he has preached is, we're going to respect every man in the room, and every football player in the room for themselves, and just like how we would want to be respected. He's going to challenge them, but he's going to respect them. So that's what I'm hoping is happening. Where a lot of the critiques that are from the national media is, the judge is treating these guys like college kids. Well, I feel like if you're going to treat them like college kids, then you're going to treat them like children. But I think there's also an element, and there's a value in challenging grown men to be the best that they can be, rather than challenging children to be the best that they can be. And I think Joe Judge, hopefully, he recognizes it long, and he's going with, I'm going to challenge grown men to be better, rather than these players like children.
The one example I can think of right now where that backfired, it's not a football thing, but it was basketball actually this year with the Cleveland Cavaliers. We saw Beeline go from Michigan, which is another excellent organization at the college level, to go to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then right away there was reports of Beeline was treating his players like college kids, and you saw how quickly he lost the locker room, and he was gone. I think it was in January they had to get rid of him because the players just did not want to play for him anymore.
Yeah.
And even too, with your point about Ben McAdoo, where it's hey, if all along he's a good guy, and then out of nowhere he just decides, okay, I'm going to be better than you, I'm going to put my foot down. If you want to be a hard-ass coach, you have to put your foot down immediately. If you do it out of nowhere just because the team is playing bad, that's when all the players are going to look around and all the stuff and all the other stuff and going to go, who is this guy? Where of all of a sudden did he decide, hey, I'm going to be this dictator, I'm going to, it's no, what we've been doing all along is wrong. Because I even know that 17 season, that was year 2 where Eli got benched for Geno Smith, and I know the Giants fans were not happy with that at all.
No, not at all. I think in hindsight, maybe we would have been okay. Okay, now how do you define okay? I think eventually we would have been able to dissect that Davis Webb, that's a necessary move to make. Where if you have these Davis Webb as a rookie, not even on the Giants roster anymore, might I say,
he's
but
with the Bills.
that would have been a more workable move than putting in Geno. Why are you putting in Geno Smith? Even if the plan was to put in Geno Smith for a week and then go to Davis Webb, that was just a disaster. But something that I was thinking about in terms of how the Giants hired this coach, how they came about hiring Joe Judge, and if we're talking about this whole thing of being a Saban descendant coming from the Saban tree and coming from the Belichick tree and how those things usually never work, I feel like Matt Patricia was a hire by the Lions because he came from the Belichick. You kind of feel like the Broncos hired McDaniels because he came from the Belichick tree. Judge, special teams coordinator, probably in right now, was not one of the names that Giants fans, and I guarantee you, even the Giants were circled once this head coaching search started. I think that how I'm approaching it, Joe Judge it was one of those where it's all right. This guy's young, up and coming special coordinator for Belichick, a guy that we have close connections to as a franchise to begin with. Let's just give this guy an interview to get prepped, to get good professional experience for a young coach, right? So that's how a lot of fans were approaching, and even beat reporters, because beat reporters were going, giving the bios of, hey, Jason Garrett could be a head coach. the defense coordinator from Baltimore, whose name is escaping me. Chaos. It's me. He had a high flip. I love him. He was actually a guy that I was somewhat.
I think Martindale.
Defensive coordinator from Baltimore. Wink Martindale.
Wink Martindale.
So he was a guy that I was rooting for. McDaniels was also a name, but he was interviewed. So Joe Judge really came out of left field. And I'll be honest, I'll even say this. I don't get off on too much of a tangent. Thank God it took Jason Garrett so to leave Dallas. Remember there was like an awkward period of Jason Garrett's technically fired, but he's still sitting up to his office. Thank God that took so long, because there was a report from Ian Rappaport, and it came out this year, that the Giants were very, very interested in Jason Garrett back in 2015, right after the Giants got shut out against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think the Maras and the Giants ownership had it, and they might have known that they were going to part ways with Coughlin, and it was either going to be McAdoo, the upcoming offense coordinator, or if the Cowboys decided to part ways with Garrett, they really loved Jason Garrett. Jason Garrett was also a backup quarterback for the Giants for a hot sec. So thank God he's the coordinator, and also thank God it took him that long to leave Dallas. So that's also my take about Judge, where Judge wasn't brought in because he's a Belichick descendant. He's brought in because he absolutely blew away Giants front office management, and he blew away Dave Gettleman as well, because it was definitely a hire than at a left field. From everything that we've heard him say, and again, it's just coach speak right now, he's gotten Giants fans excited for the direction of the franchise more than Daniel Jones has, than Saquon Barkley has, and certainly more than Dave Gettleman's roster has. Joe Judge single-handedly has gotten fans very excited.
Sorry about that, guys. We just ran into some quick technical issues, but Justin has made some very excellent points about the Giants. You know the one thing that the Jason Garrett firing with the Cowboys kind of reminded me of? When you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, either if you're the guy or the girl, or in this day and age, no matter your sexual orientation, but when you know you're going to break up with someone, but it's prolonged. You know it's coming, but you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and when it happens, you're just not shocked.
But also, there could be one of the party, and I think this person was actually Jason Garrett. It's like, yeah, we're done. And then they were like, well, no, we're not. No, we're not. We're not done. I'm still here. But we're actually done, though. And I really do think Jerry Jones was probably, who knows? Maybe it probably hurt Jerry Jones to let Jason Garrett go. So maybe that was crazy how that all went down. But I'm willing to bet that one of those parties, either Jerry Jones or Jason Garrett, was telling the other, hey, it's done. I know it's done. Just let me go, or you have to go. And that's a fun metaphor. I like that.
Is this what the whole time too, or even too, where it was like, hey, I do imagine though it was hard for Jerry to get rid of Jason Garrett, but at the same time, it's just if you know you're going to get rid of him, don't prolong the situation. I remember seeing Ian Rappaport, all these other guys Pro Football Talk, Mike Florio. Every day it was Adam Schefter too. It was, oh, is he fired? Is he not fired? Okay, we haven't heard anything that he's officially fired, but we assume he's fired. The only time it was ever bad, where I knew a coach was getting fired right away, was 2 years ago when the Jets let go of Todd Bowles. I remember week 17, the Jets were still playing the Patriots, and the Jets were getting their asses kicked, but it was pretty much oh yeah, well, Todd Bowles is pretty much done. It's we're in the third quarter. It was I just wanted to bring that up because it was two complete opposite ends of the spectrum. You're talking about a guy getting fired where it's he's still coaching a football game. They may be down by 20, but he's still the coach, and he's still wearing green.
That's bizarre. Black Monday kind of creeps into Sunday sometimes too. But yeah, the way the whole thing went down, and I was saying before, hopefully it didn't. I'm saying Giants, thank goodness that prolonged itself, because I can definitely see Jason Garrett being the Giants head coach if Garrett was able to get that interview a lot earlier. And in a way, that kind of hurt him. Who knows? Jason Garrett probably may have gotten another head coach. The Giants probably would have been suckers and hired him. But that process of prolonging him leaving the building possibly cost him a head coaching job. But I'm happy he's an offense coordinator. So in a way, everything worked out like it should.
And also, too, the way I look at the Joe Judge hiring, the last time a special teams coordinator came off of a very coach's hiring tree just happened to be a guy who, I don't know, he's been with the Baltimore Ravens for a long time. He's an Andy Reid disciple, though, but look, hey, if John Harbaugh can make it as a special teams coach, even to Bill Belichick at one point was a special teams coach. Everyone sees like offensive and defensive coordinators as like these big head coaches, which there are two out there who should be head coaches right now but aren't, and that's still something that eats me, which is Eric Bieniemy and Robert Saleh. But the fact that special team coordinators get so overlooked for their talents, like I even say too, one of the most pivotal players on the New England Patriots is Matt Slater. I almost said Stafford for a second, I don't know why. But Matt Slater and his play. Special teams is honestly one of the most overlooked positions in football.
Yeah. Now, frankly, I'm biased because as a fan and as a football fan, I do kind of tune out special teams, and it's bad. It's bad. I will admit that's a bad part of my fandom. But I could, in a way, I could care less. That is not the case. I mean, the way that Joe Judge speaks about special teams and how those special teams coordinators have to evaluate football players, it's extremely different from how solely offensive coaches have to evaluate football players and how solely defensive coaches have to evaluate football players. And this isn't something that I really realized and I really didn't really come to my brain until you really heard Joe Judge talk about it. They're evaluating the entire roster at them as straight up athletes. I'm looking at a guy what he can do for this football team. I'm not looking at maybe how far he can throw or certain intangibles about how he could be a good lineman, how the receiver can catch the ball. I'm just looking about how they are good football players and how they can be good athletes for this football team and what they do good athletically, which I think is impressive. And you mentioned Brett Bielema. He's out. Brett. Not Brett Bielema. I'm sorry. You mentioned the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs, correct?
Yes, I mentioned Eric Bieniemy, who's the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs, and Robert Saleh, the current defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, and you want to talk about a successful coaching tree, unlike the Saban and the Belichick tree. I mean, Andy Reid has a very successful coaching tree, so I'm with you. I'm with you. Get that guy on your football team.
Yeah, like, even, too, like how I was saying with Eric Bieniemy, like, obviously there's all that stuff, too, right now with, like, Black Lives Matter and how there's not a lot of NFL head coaches who are of minority descent. Like, even, I only say that because you have Ron Rivera, you've got Brian Flores, you got Anthony Lynn and Mike Tomlin. Like, Bieniemy, it's one of those guys where I'm looking at him, like, let's take a look at Cleveland. I feel like Kevin Stefanski he's a good offensive coordinator, do not get me wrong. I just feel like that was just a desperation hire. Cleveland saying, "Oh, he's the best guy. Let's go. Let's get him." Like, I feel like if they had waited until after the Super Bowl, like, sometimes if you rush something, it's when you're going to screw it up. When you wait, like, look, Giant fans seem happy with Joe Judge, and the process was waited out. Like, instead of going out there and making a rash hire, they took their time.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And the reason why I got Eric Bieniemy and Brett Bielema was the outside linebackers coach for the Giants. So that's
very similar sounding. It's all good. It's all good, my man.
Oh my gosh, yeah. All right, do you want to maybe move? I'm kind of feeling some NFL talk right now. What do you throw me some NFL talk my way?
I will, but before I do that, there is one thing I have to get off my chest, and it's your game week 1. I'm excited for it, not because it's Monday Night Football. It's for who is calling the game. College football's Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit. Like, listening to those two, they just know and love the game. I just had to say that of how excited I am. Like, no disrespect to, I think it's Steve Levy, Brian Griese, and Louis Riddick. But those two, man, just make football, like watching football games so much better. So I just had to say that quickly, where... that's the main reason I'm tuning into that Steelers-Giants game week 1. Not just because it's Monday night, but because of who's calling it.
No, absolutely. I mean, especially when they're going to have their time to prep. They're going to have their time to look over, everything that needs to be looked for this particular game, and especially with, college season being in question. They have that Monday Night Football crew, but I would love if they worked those guys somehow, especially Herbstreit. Herbstreit's he's a fun, he really does make games fun, and especially when you watch college football and you're not a fan of a certain, you feel like you know the team. You feel like you know exactly what's happening, and that's really awesome about what those guys are able to do. So I'm with you. It's going to be a different feel, especially sometimes I feel broadcast can be frustrating. If even people get frustrated by Joe Buck and Troy Aikman because largely NFC teams are on. Giants haven't had a Joe Buck and Troy Aikman in a long time because they haven't been America's Game of the Week in a long time. So even sometimes the Fox guys can get frustrating, and obviously we all know the Monday Night Football crew can get very frustrating. But having these two guys call the game and have they're going to be leading off for NFL season, that's kind of really awesome. We're really looking forward to it.
And the only other point I wanted to make is you guys, because with the America's Game of the Week, because it's usually week 1 or week 2 against the Cowboys, but it's either America's Game of the Week or it's Michaels and Collinsworth.
Yep. No, Giants haven't we haven't gotten our street cred back yet to be put on national television. I mean, we obviously Thursday night and Monday night, but there's nothing like Sunday night. I really think, and this is very much a consensus among a lot of football fans, it's a different vibe. It's a different feel. When you get that Sunday night football playing, whether it's Carrie Underwood, Joan Jett, you get the instrumentals playing with the guy running out of the tunnel and Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth with this stupid little chair move that he does. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. It's honestly the best feeling. And not regardless if your team wins or loses, but I'll say it. Regardless of whether your team wins or loses, that's the best feeling of the day that you get because you watch a pretty darn football game.
Before we get into NFL talk, there's one other thing I want to say. Waiting all day for Sunday night is some of my favorite words. As much as I love Carrie Underwood, nothing beats that Faith Hill theme that once was.
No, absolutely right. You're 100% on the money. But who I give credit to is Joan Jett, because that song, I've been waiting all day for Sunday night, it's based off of I Hate Myself for Loving You by Joan Jett. So I always have to give her credit. I love how they actually threw her in with Carrie Underwood in the theme last year. They were able to do that this year. I don't know if just Carrie Underwood, and I don't know how many people they could have in the room due to COVID. But yeah, I always give Joan Jett credit no matter what. But yes, Faith Hill's probably the favorite. And then even didn't Pink do it? Why do I remember Pink doing it? This is a while back.
I think she may have done it a while back. I'm going to ask you a quick question. Just I want to stay in the NFC East for a quick second. Which team do you see doing better this year, the Cowboys or the Eagles?
Oh man, this is rough because the Cowboys have top 5 talent in the National Football League. Top 5 talent on the board, all around the board. We're talking about offense, we're talking about defense. They made some draft blunders of, just barely missing. Arguably, maybe they should even traded for a guy like Micah Fitzpatrick last year, and that would have really made their secondary pop. But Nathan Duresh, they found a way to re-sign Sean Lee. I think, even though Byron Jones in the secondary is a little bit of question, Byron Jones is leaving. It's a pretty talented defense, talented secondary. That defensive line is stacked. Even McCoy tore his ACL. And the offense, obviously bringing on such a talented wide receiver. Arguably three number 1 wide receivers on your offense right now. I still view the Eagles as a team that's really going to pull it out. I love Doug Peterson. If the Eagles, and this is my new favorite phrase, if the player can stay healthy, if XY person can stay healthy, the Eagles have been plagued with injuries these last few years. It's always in the secondary, it's always at the wide receiver, and it's also ironic, at the quarterback position, which is basically a death sentence in the NFL if you lose your quarterback. Unless it's a backup like Nick Foles. So if those wide receivers can stay healthy collectively as a group, they have 2 very good tight ends in Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. If that defense stay healthy, I believe in that defensive unit as well. I really do think that they can make this because they have the continuity of the coaching staff. Because I love Carson Wentz. I think as a Giants fan, I'm saying this. I love Carson Wentz. If he is right, how he took that team last year to an NFC East title when some leading receivers on the team barely eclipsed maybe 500 receiving yards, maybe not counting Zach Ertz. We're just talking solely about wide receivers. It was absolutely incredible what he did with that football year and how he was able to perform and still be a very efficient quarterback. Sure, he has a bit of a fumbling problem. Giants fans like to throw that out there. But fumbles can be a little bit random. I would rather have a quarterback that maybe holds onto the ball for a little bit longer and tries to throw it down the field rather than a guy that's just dumping it down all day long, maybe like a Derek Carr. But Derek Carr's pretty good in his own regard too. But I'm kind of believing in the Eagles this year. I think the Cowboys, they always find a way to kind of mess it up. And I don't believe in Dak as much as I believe in Carson Wentz.
I do. I agree with you on the Carson Wentz front, just because, look, when he's fully healthy, he is MVP caliber. Like 2017, he doesn't tear his ACL. He's the MVP of the National Football League, without
absolutely.
question. But the one thing too, like you're right, it's health. That's the one big thing with the Philadelphia Eagles is health. Like how they're banged up in the secondary, how Wentz has been in and out of injuries the last few years with his shoulder, and then last year with concussion problem in the wild card game, and then his ACL obviously in 2017. But the big thing with those two teams, and also to why I give the edge to the Eagles too over the Cowboys, is the secondary. Even though they can be banged up, I still take this because the Dallas, like everyone raves about their defense. It's like the Houston Texans. Houston Texans have arguably one of the best front sevens in football.
Yeah.
Their secondary has been their kryptonite forever. They give up so many big plays. People if you go back and listen to a few episodes, you will see me rip the Houston Texans for shreds. Not only from the trade that they did back in March because of conduct that apparently was detrimental to the team, which we'll get into a second because there's a potential another player like that coming to the NFC East. But the fact that you give up a generational talent just because apparently, it's a problem, like, I can go on all day about the Houston Texans, but that's how I just view the Dallas Cowboys secondary is where it's like, oh, hey, look, they can get to the quarterback. DeMarcus Lawrence is still great. Van Der Esch is great. Jalen Smith can ball. When you got guys giving up long passes, you're going to lose football games.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a passing league, and if offenses can find a way to take advantage of throwing the ball down the field, they're absolutely going to. And the way that I know Kyle Shanahan attacks his offense now, and the way that he game plan is, I'm going to find the one guy on the football field. So whether that's a linebacker, whether that's a safety, whether that's a slot corner, I'm going to find the one guy on the football field that is not up to par with everyone else around him, and I'm going to attack guy, and I'm going to attack that spot of the field over and over and over again until you can find some sort of solution. So, especially for the Giants last year, hey, it's great that you have Janoris Jenkins. Even, DeAndre Baker was not that great last year, but he had his good starts last year. But the Giants, that's where they would struggle over and over again. So Grant Haley, the guy with no ball skills, and we saw that in the Viking. Adam Thielen would just be run a slot, and he would destroy the Giants last year. And we see that over and over again. Smart offensive coordinators, they're going to find a way to just target whatever spot of your defense there is. Even if there are guys around you that are pretty, even if, let's say if you got two good boundary corners, if your slot corner is not up to par, good offensive coordinators are going to find a way to attack and adjust their game plan. So, yeah, I'm with you. I especially like what Philly did on offense. Adding Jalen Reagor, obviously, you take the quarterback Hurts in the second round. That's controversial. They want to be a QB factory. Sure, go for it. But I still like the continuity of Peterson. I love offense. Miles Sanders, I know he has a lower body injury, but apparently that's looking better and better every day. I thought I got really scared after I heard the first diagnosis of week to week instead of day to day. But if we're even talking fantasy, I feel kind of Miles Sanders in the second round. When the injury first happened, I actually had a draft that night. I didn't feel comfortable. I was seeing some other things, and I'm like, all right, a little bit better, hearing some other opinions from some other people. I feel a lot better about Miles Sanders because also, Eagles have an awesome offensive line as well. Al's offensive line isn't exactly the same. We've lost some pieces. Tyrone Smith is getting another year older at that left tackle spot. Still think he's great. I even think Tyrone Smith is arguably a Hall of Famer, but still another year older. I know the Eagles lost an all-pro guard, but I love their group. I love their group if they could stay healthy, which again is my new favorite phrase.
That's another thing I just forgot about that you reminded me of. Thank you. Was Brandon Brooks unfortunately going down with a torn Achilles this year. And also, too, just want to send best wishes to Grant Delpit, who's unfortunately a rookie. You always hate, no matter the team, you always hate to see when a rookie goes down in training camp with a season-ending injury.
Yeah, no, I think two LSU guys both went down with some injuries today. So, yeah, but definitely Delpit, a safety that, this was a pretty star-studded safe draft class. McKinney arguably leading them Grant Delpit was in it, Ashton Davis, Antoine Winfield. So it's a shame when you can't see a guy out there, especially for a year, to see how he can grow.
Yeah, exactly. And also, too, the other thing I want to make to your point is I think DeAndre Baker has worse issues off the field now than on the field.
It's safe to say he's no longer going to be a and I was a criminal justice major in college, so it was a good time to really made that degree worth it this offseason. I actually thought that he was going to get – I thought he was going to get scotch-free. Like, it was looking that good. But then, of course, when you put in the Instagram DMs that you paid off your witnesses and the time, the location, and how much money they're going to pay them to against the initial affidavits, then guess what? You're going to go to jail. So that was not good. That was his Achilles heel of having those Instagram DMs and you paying. I mean, a lot of people pay off witnesses, but the fact that it went on the Instagram DMs was a big. So don't do that if you want to commit a crime.
None of us will. I don't think Justin or myself will. But it's just a good note for if anyone out there decides to be a criminal degenerate. The only reason I didn't mention Washington when I asked about that is just because I feel like Washington's in the same sort of position as you guys, where it's like, hey, there's. Which I commend Washington for finally getting rid of. I think it was Bruce Allen for finally getting rid of him.
Yes.
That's the big thing that they had to do was just get rid of him. Dan Snyder's like, hey, we're finally going to change our image around. Even though everyone was making fun of them just being called Washington Football Team, it's a lot better. I just don't like saying the old name just because of the history behind it. But the fact that you went out there, you changed it, you didn't do anything to the color scheme, it's just a simple. Like, I don't think they're having a W on their helmet. I think they're going Alabama with just the numbers. I only say special because they have got a stud on their defensive line.
Oh, absolutely. And about the whole, branding change, good in a way. I want to say good for them, but also, they had the whole, sexual abuse scandal come out, which I believe that investigation is still pending. So in a way, it was a forced culture change, because even FedEx said that they were going to pull out and they were going to remove their name from the stadium if they didn't consider a name change. So regardless of how it comes about and who initiates it, I think it's necessary to change the culture over there. Good uniform look. I like it. And actually, I was criticized. I started to be a Talkin Giants co-host at the beginning of this year after I was doing a couple years my own thing on my own show. Became the Talkin Giants co-host, and I actually got criticized. I called them the Washington Football Club. For a very long time, I'm the same boat, Griff. I did not want to use that, their team name. So I always called them the Washington Football Club, and I actually got criticized in DMs, oh, you're a snowflake, blah blah blah. I'm like, all right, we don't need to make things that dramatic, and we don't need to make societal points on my choice of words. But Chase Young, second pick of this year's draft. He is a force on that line. It's going to be interesting to see how, and this is really for any defensive lineman and really any football player at all, but how he adjusts, number one, the speed of the game, but also the strength of the game. I think speed, he's going to be just fine. But I think it's that strength part of, if offensive tackles, big, strong offensive tackles, and especially you're dealing with those guys in the NFC East. We'll even throw Andrew Thomas in there. He's a big, strong left tackle. When these guys get their hands on you, it's tough to shake them off. It's tough. You can't typically do the same bull rushing things, and you're the strongest guy on the field, maybe like you were able to do in college, and you're going up against a team like Rutgers, let's say. So Chase Young, I'm excited to see what he can do just as a football fan. I hope he does nothing the 2 times a year that we face them. But excited to see what he can do just as a football fan, and excited to see how he can grow. Because he was a stud. He was light years beyond what a typical edge rusher was at Ohio State.
Okay. And now that we're talking football, I'm thinking we got to get away from the NFC East, man. I keep going back to it for some reason, but I know because that's your main domain. I want to ask you, though, if out of all the teams in the NFC, who are your main dark horses that you're looking at? Like a team that can kind of come out of nowhere and surprise people.
Yeah, I love the Vikings, and I don't know what they're considered dark horse, but I think everybody always predicts that maybe the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Packers, the Saints. Excuse me, but I really do view the Vikings with Kirk Cousins I like Kirk Cousins. I like Kirk Cousins as a quarterback. I know he gets the critique of not performing well in big games. He did win a playoff game last year. Arguably was an offensive pass interference by Kyle Rudolph, but they did win the game. The New Orleans Saints continue to get screwed in the playoffs. But if Kirk Cousins can continue to put it together in big games, obviously the loss of Stefanski is pretty big for them because they had a pretty creative run scheme. I love the way that they used play action. It got Kirk Cousins out into space. It therefore even got Adam Thielen with those crossing routes out into space as well. You know, Von Dix, the part of him is tough, but adding Justin Jefferson is also pretty big. There are some people in the industry. I actually heard some tidbits from hanging out with some fantasy friends that Justin is going to be the number one wide receiver in Minnesota by the time we get to November, December. I think that's a stretch. I don't think that's going, but there is an expectation that Justin Jefferson is going to be pretty darn good for them, and I would expect that even from year one. You still got Dalvin Cook back there. You still have the majority of that offensive line, and Gary Kubiak comes in, who I've always loved. We were talking about the Texans before. I just like Gary Kubiak. I've always liked those Texans teams. I think it's a shame that they couldn't put it together. Matt Schaub and Andre Johnson and Foster, that's a pretty darn good trio on offense right there. I think it's a shame that they never really put it together, but they bring in Gary Kubiak. He's the offense coordinator for that team. I think it's a dark horse. They may even let Kirk Cousins throw the ball a little bit more. His attempts per game actually rose dramatically as the season went on. Dalvin Cook, they were really feeding Dalvin Cook early in the season. They also had a lot of blowouts. I know the Packers week 1, that was pretty much a blowout, so Dalvin Cook got a lot of carries, but let Kirk Cousins, let him go. What's his catchphrase? What's his catchphrase?
You like that?
You like that? I'm liking Kirk Cousins this year, so hoping he can let it ride. Maybe I'll give you another dark horse. Speaking of creative run schemes, Arizona Cardinals. You really see second-year quarterbacks take a big jump, or you can see them kind of take a little step down. Baker Mayfield is one of those guys that took a step down. But even Mitchell Trubisky, he took a big second-year jump, which made everyone that his 2019 season was also going to be a step up, but he obviously went down his third year. But Jared Goff took a huge step his second year. We're hoping to see the same from Daniel Jones. Carson Wentz took a big step up his second year. You know, he was. We were talking about how he was an MVP candidate his second season, the season that he tore his ACL, in the season that the Eagles won the Super Bowl. So the Arizona Cardinals, and led by Kyler Murray, you're bringing in DeAndre Hopkins. They're drafting Isaiah Simmons, who is, by the way, he's purely a linebacker. Obviously, he's versatile in the things that he can do, but he's purely a linebacker. He's not going to be lining up at safety, corner, edge rusher. He's going to be, I think, pretty much purely an interior linebacker who can do a lot of good things, versatile things within that role. So that defense has improved. I love Kingsbury's run scheme. Kenyon Drake also traded for him midway through the season. He had 8 games last year. I know he's in a walking boot now, so that's something to keep an eye on. But Kenyon Drake looked pretty good catching the ball out of the backfield in these games last year and also rushing the ball. And Arizona, they have such a creative run scheme. The pass, I know, Kingsbury, in the whole offensive scheme, we like to think that the passing game is, it's not that creative, but the run game is so fun with that outside zone. And the fact that they have offensive linemen that can move like that can fit that scheme, it must be a lot of fun to be an offensive lineman in that scheme, to allow them to get out into space and to do some fun things in that outside zone scheme. Since it's rare. Not a lot of teams do it. The Vikings do that outside zone scheme, the 49ers do that outside zone scheme, and the Cardinals do that outside zone scheme. And that's really all the teams that I can really think about on the top of my head that do that. The rest of the teams are pretty much like inside zone teams. They're running the ball like 50 to 60%, inside that center and guard spot.
I'm going to be honest with you for a second. The Arizona Cardinals are my sweetheart team. They're that team that I want to see them do good. Like, I honestly was kind of skeptical of Kingsbury at first, but once he came in, I was nothing but impressed with the guy. Like, how he carries himself, how he knows, okay, look, it's going to be tough year 1. Year 2, we'll see what happens. But like you said, Isaiah Simmons, also adding in Josh Jones from Houston because I always said this going into the draft that the Cardinals needed to address their offensive line and their front seven, which they also did too by getting Rashard Lawrence from LSU and then Lekai Fotu from Utah. So basically, they just added all the puzzles. As for now, like I'm not saying Kyler Murray's going to come out here and be an MVP like Carson Wentz should have or would have been, or Lamar Jackson was last year, but I think they have some room to make noise in the NFC West. Because, like, honestly, if I had to rank the teams right now in the division, I go San Francisco, Seattle, Arizona, and then LA. I only say that because, man, not only do their uniforms suck now, but the team's not exactly... I honestly say that them having a bad year last year was kind of karma for what happened in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, it's strange because I was about to say St. Louis. LA kind of switched from being solely an 11 personnel team, because that's what Sean McVay did. That was his bread and butter. Like 80-90% of the time, he's running out of 11 personnel. He's running out of the shotgun, 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back. And then they kind of switched to 12 personnel, which 12 personnel is 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, 1 running back. They switched, and that's where we really saw, like, Robert Woods took a huge step up when they switched to 12 personnel and they stopped getting 3 wide receivers on the field, largely because I think they partially made the switch because they needed to protect the quarterback a bit more, but also Cook's, his injury history was absolutely terrible. He struggled with injuries all last year, so it was basically just Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods last year and Robert Woods kind of exploded, and Higbee had a good year too. So, yeah, the Rams, they're in a funky spot because also, you're talking about Todd Gurley leaving. Todd Gurley's fall from grace has been absolutely amazing to see, where if you look at NFL stats in terms of, like, rushing yards over expected, that's something that's a metric that isolates individual running performances. It's rare to see a running back have a negative rushing yards over expected. That means that his yards per carry is like minus, and it's less than what he's actually expected to get based off of player tracking data. And Todd Gurley is one of those guys. He had a negative rushing yards over expected. So his fall from grace was insane to see. Tell you what, though, as a Giants fan, and we're playing them in the first 4 weeks of the season, that secondary and that defense is still legit. And if they can find a way to, not hold, have offenses to get through and continue to give the offense possessions, opportunities to put the ball in the end zone, then the Rams still have. I think the NFC West. Honestly, the NFC West is probably the most competitive division of football.
I do agree with that, but also, too, the other thing I want to point out today with their secondary is that they did re-sign Budda Baker, making him the highest paid safety in the NFL now. Oh, yeah, that was breaking today as we're recording. Yeah. The other team, I don't want to call them a dark horse, but I can honestly see them bounce back. It would not shock me if Chicago had I'm not saying they're going to have 12 wins again, but it wouldn't shock me if they were like 8-8, 9-7, like if they're that fringe playoff team.
Yeah, because the whole wild card of what 2020 season is going to be, along with COVID, is going to be that added playoff spot. And the fact that they went 8-8 last year with Mitch Trubisky throwing the ball all over the field, not where he's throwing and being such a pretty inaccurate quarterback. You have Nick Foles in there, who you're hoping to stabilize things a little bit more. Allen Robinson also, he's going to be a free agent next year. It's his contract year, so you expect him to really put up big numbers this year. Allen Robinson also sneakily had the most targets in the National Football League last year. Sneaky. You wouldn't expect it. Up there with Julio Jones, and I'm forgetting who else, bad podcasting, bad radio. Julio Jones was up there. Oh, D-Hop, DeAndre Hopkins also got top 2 targets last year. Allen Robinson sitting there with 3rd most targets last year. So, maybe if he can get a lot more catchable balls this year, he's going to be putting up a lot better numbers. But the fact that Chicago went 8-8 last year just tells you how talented that roster is. So, yeah, Chicago, I like that team, because especially if they go 8-8, if they increase 9-7, they could be a team that sneaks into that extra wild card spot.
And the only other thing I will say, they did lose Nick Kowalski, which I do think that's going to be a big loss for them at the linebacker position, because he was able to come in there. I'm not saying he was a dynamic player, but when you needed to play, he was your guy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They also lost. They didn't lose. They chose to cut him. They lost Prince Amukamara, which actually he kind of turned his career around when he went to Chicago there for a few years. Who
both of them are now on the the Las Vegas Raiders, who I actually saw footage of their stadium, and it looks pretty nice. The one team I want to talk about quickly is, and I honestly do not see them winning the division. I see them being a wild card team or even potentially missing out. That's Tampa Bay. And before everyone gets on me saying, Brady was your quarterback for 20 years. He's Brady. He's got the best weapons ever. I was listening to Get Up today. Diana Rossini made a great point. Brady likes structure. I think he kind of is going to miss Belichick always barking at him. Now he has Bruce Arians where he's kind of like, he's that free-range puppy, but at the same time, too, I feel like he likes to be held back. And the other point I want to make, too, even though he says he's doing good, Rob Gronkowski has not had a healthy season in the NFL since 2011, where he played 16 total games.
I mean, I guess the good thing about Tampa Bay is they have a million tight ends. O.J. Howard, you feel, is a more than capable tight end. Cameron Brate is also a guy that you might feel good about as well. But yeah, I agree with you about Tampa Bay. I'm kind of glad that we're both in the same boat. I don't view Tom Brady as the same quarterback he was even 3 years ago. Forget 5, 6, 7 years ago. I feel, especially last year, even if you look at his ESPN QBR, which largely relies on EPA, which EPA is trying to look at football from a situational analysis rather than just looking at volume stats like yards, total yards, completion percentage, etc. Tom Brady was down there with like Daniel Jones and Aaron Rodgers at EPA, and I say down there because even Aaron Rodgers was somewhat average to below average in terms of how good of a situational quarterback he was. So while Tom Brady, him throwing the ball deep down the field, his accuracy numbers are somewhat well. He's not doing it as often. I feel in total he's not as good of a deep quarterback as he was. And that's where a guy like Mike Evans lives. A guy like Mike Evans lives deep downfield. Jameis Winston would be throwing it up to him all year long last year. And Chris Godwin, I actually think Chris Godwin is going to explode this year. Because you're going to have Chris Godwin lining the slot, and Brady, he's going to be that guy that Brady's going to be hitting him with the intermediate routes, and they're going to have a lot of fun together. Chris Godwin is the best, or you can argue is the best wide receiver that Tom Brady's played with. And I really want to make sure that I'm saying this correctly. You can make an argument that it's since Randy Moss. I understand, Edelman's pretty good. I understand that Welker was also pretty good as well. But Chris Godwin had an amazing year last year with an offense. Obviously, it aired it out. But I really, really love Chris Godwin and his potential and how he's going to continue to grow as a football player. But I want to get behind. I really want to get behind this Tampa Bay team, especially when you consider the talent defense with Devin White. They have Shaq and even Todd Bowles as their defense coordinator. You love that. And even Jason Pierre-Paul, who's a former Giant, who has still continued to play somewhat well besides having injuries and having 7.5 fingers. You want to believe in that team, but there's still just something that's holding me back. I'm with you, Griff. Something is holding me back and saying, yeah, the Tampa Bay Bucks, they're going to be a 10-11 win. I can't say that fully confidently. I just can't.
The other thing I'd like to look at too for Tampa, where I don't, one player I think I will have a good year this year for them, and very underrated, Scotty Miller, their slot receiver, because he's the prototypical Patriots wide receiver, short white guy who can run fast routes.
I love it.
Yeah, and I do agree with you on the Chris Godwin take because look, last year, and I do this myself every year. I always take him in fantasy. Mike Evans, he's good. 1 week, 25 points. Next week, 6. There's no consistency. So for any of you out there drafting for fantasy, take Chris Godwin. Do not take Mike Evans.
Yes, 100%.
The only other thing I want to point out with Tampa is that the Patriots have one of the best offensive lines in football and are getting back probably one of their best offensive linemen this year. Meanwhile, Jameis Winston had 47 sacks against him last year, and the run game for Tampa is the other thing that concerns me. Everyone's like, well, they run Shady McCoy. I'm like, Shady McCoy has not been good in a while, and also too, Ronald Jones is okay, but he's not. He's not there.
Oh well, Ronald Jones, the kid clip that got passed around NFL and fantasy circles a couple days ago was Ronald Jones dropping a wide open pass to Tom Brady. So now the joke is that Ronald Jones is done. He's not going to see another target out of spite from Tom Brady this year because he dropped one pass in training camp.
Yeah. But I just wanted to bring up that offensive line point because, and also too, I was referring to, by the way, for those of you who don't know, David Andrews, who unfortunately was out with blood clots in 2019. But him and Brady had a very special relationship in New England. But that's the only thing I want to say too is just to reiterate is that offensive line in Tampa concerns me.
they added Tristan Wirfs, and honestly, if I had to rank my offensive tackles, I would put Wirfs, but also don't view Wirfs as a tackle. I view him as a guard. The only system that I view Trish as a tackle is in an outside zone scheme. So we were talking about before the Vikings, the Cardinals, the 49ers. And the reason why I say that is because Wirfs is such an athlete and he's so good in space that his natural spot, definitely 100% guard, but also you look at his footwork. I feel like his feet, they're very tight. His feet get very close together. They're not choppy steps. They're not typical pass sets. He likes to cross it somewhat often. Tristan Wirfs, good that he's starting at right tackle if there is a plan to transition to left tackle, because he did play both at Iowa. He did play left tackle at Iowa as well. But I'm glad that he's starting at right tackle. He played both spots there, both spots, right tackle, left tackle in college. But I really do that his natural spot is, I really do. So we may see a transition there one day, but also he could suppress and he could blow us away at right tackle. But definitely the offensive line may be a little bit of concern, because you even have Ron Jensen, who's an undrafted free agent.
Yeah, and because right now, even to the only argument I would make with Brady with quarterback stats is that he is the third best quarterback. I would say stat wise, I think Matt Ryan had a better 2019 than Tom Brady did, and that honestly is the Saints' division to lose. I think it's their division to win. I think this is the year they're going for it all. Adding in guys like Emmanuel Sanders, re-signing Janoris Jenkins, bringing back Malcolm Jenkins. I know they lost some people, Eli Apple, who I know Giants fans aren't exactly fond of. But that's the only thing I got to say. I think who dat they want it all this year. They want the championship.
Something, my very fun fact that I loved when I was looking at the Saints is looking at the difference of quarterback between Teddy Bridgewater, and this is relevant because those two quarterbacks they're sharing the same division now. Teddy Bridgewater's in Carolina. The way that Teddy Bridgewater played quarterback in New Orleans, and then the way that Drew Brees has continued to play quarterback in New Orleans these last few years, the difference between average time to throw when Teddy Bridgewater was in there was substantially much longer than Drew Brees. And this is what absolutely, I think it's me that Sean Payton is able to adjust based off of what his quarterback strengths are, where I don't necessarily know that Teddy Bridgewater is this guy that's going to be a quick 3-step drop guy. He's to fire to his first. He's going to know he's going as soon as the ball is. Teddy Bridgewater may be a guy where even though he's not a guy that's going to air on the field, but with good offensive line, he's going to be a guy that's going to hold the ball, and he's going to need time to decide, go through his progressions in terms of where he's going. But Drew Brees these last few years, and why this is so automatic, where before the snap of the ball, Drew Brees is going to throw the ball to Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas is going to get an insane amount of targets. Drew Brees is going to hold on to the ball for 2.5 seconds on average. So good luck getting back there if you're a pass rusher. 1, 2, and then before you can even get to 3, the ball is out of his hands. So good luck if you're trying to develop a pass rush and you're trying to get pressure on him. The ball, where it's going. And yet you still can't stop it. It's absolutely crazy. And think about the Saints as well. It recently came out that Alvin Kamara was dealing with an entire season that opted to not get surgery. He opted to not get surgery on it. And the fact that Alvin Kamara was still able to stay active, and you saw his elusiveness. Oh, that's tough. That's a tough word to say. Elusiveness numbers somewhat dropped dramatically compared to before he was hurt and after he was hurt. But still, after he was hurt, he was still able to sustain himself and play somewhat well. If Alvin Kamara is fully he's ready to take back on, being one of the best in the entire league. So I'm very excited to see what he can do healthy. You're adding in Emmanuel Sanders, who I still don't know how that man in the league. I feel like he's taken so many big hits in his career. He's such a tiny guy, but I'm excited to see what he can do in this New Orleans Saints offense. Hopefully every once in a while, when Drew Brees wants to expand the field and he throw the ball deep down the field, Emmanuel Sanders is streaking down the field wide, and we get to see some big plays. And Jared Cook, also a very underrated tight end.
The other point I want to make quickly with Emmanuel Sanders and Michael Thomas is that you're going to be like, oh, we got Michael Thomas double covered, no problem. There goes Emmanuel Sanders just streaking down the field.
Right.
Yeah. And I know we've been talking for a while, but before we wrap up, I want to talk NFC for a minute. And I'm going to give my... I have two dark horses for the NFC. One of them, you guys are playing week 1. That is, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, if Ben stays healthy, they're in the playoffs, no question. Well, they have one of the wild cards. I think the other two, who's going to shock people and win the division, I think the Colts win the AFC South.
Yeah, that's bold, and I like it because they have two of the most talented rosters, especially the Colts. Oh boy, in a way, was I hoping that Dave Gettleman would possibly be fired from the Giants so we can snag up that assistant general manager because he built that roster over there, despite not having a franchise quarterback. Unexpectedly, your franchise quarterback retires, unfortunately, for both himself personally and the franchise, but he also, you made the best decision for yourself personally, but going through all of that and sustaining and still winning 7 games and putting together a really solid run. I like the Colts, and I don't think Phillip Rivers was really as bad as many people want to make him out to be last year, which is kind of surprising because I thought that Los Angeles Chargers roster was ready to kind of rock and roll last year. I thought they were actually going to be competing with the Chiefs, but that obviously didn't happen. Go for the Chargers. That was my bad take. Let's see. Who's a dark? You know what? I love the Bills. I love their roster. I think Josh Allen, another year of just showing that he can win football games. Josh Allen, he may not make it look pretty, but he does enough to sustain drives. He does enough to, especially with his legs. I love what he can do with his legs. I think he's smart with the football. I think he, obviously he needs to improve the deep ball accuracy. For a guy that has such tremendous arm, he really, really needs to improve that deep ball accuracy. But at the end of the day, Josh Allen, he wins football games, and they won 10 games last year. Even played the Patriots pretty well last year, at least in one of their matchups. So I honestly, I know people still like to say, and I know you're a Bills fan, so you watch the Bills a lot more than I do. You watch those matchups more than I do. But I think this is division to be had simply because I think the roster is much better than what New England has, which I know a lot of people still say that even with the arrival of Cam Newton, that it's the Patriots division to be had and still to be had. I think it's the Bills division to be had. I mean, where are you on that?
Honestly, with this year with the Patriots, this season to me, ever since Brady's left, is Pandora's box. I'm going in open-minded. I don't think we're going to be terrible, like the whole tank for Trevor stuff that Patriot fans tweet. I think, like when I do it, I just joke. Like obviously, no. I think our best case scenario, we're an 11-5 team. Our worst case scenario, we're 7-9, 8-8. So we're that like mediocre stretch. The thing with Allen is, I'll say this to the Bills, I like the team. I hate the fan base because I went there for an away game and it was with my family and I was treated really badly. Like it was just, it was a lot of abuse that I didn't really expect at the time because I didn't really know too much about Bills Mafia back in the day. But the thing, like what you're saying with Josh Allen is correct. He's a good quarterback. It's just, if he can get his deep ball accuracy on point, this is a scary, scary football team. If he's still missing bombs with Stephon Diggs, I think they're good. They're the same thing where I think they either finish somewhere between 9-7, potentially too. They could be 11-5 or 12-4 in my opinion. The only other points too I want to make quickly with the Indianapolis Colts is drafting guys like Michael Pittman Jr. and Jonathan Taylor for fantasy value and for on-field value. Holy crap! And also too the fact that they had an amazing defense last year. You added DeForest Buckner into that mix. Those are the only other 2 points I want to make with the Colts.
I was actually having a conversation today with some friends about Quentin Nelson. You can make an argument if we're just talking about football players, and if we're talking about people that are good at the game of football, not considering positional value, obviously quarterback and blah 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 blah. You can make an argument that Quentin Nelson is the best football player in the National Football because of how good he is at his craft. And one of my friends says, I disagree with that because he hasn't gotten. But that's the thing. He's good since day one. That's the thing. My favorite play of Quentin Nelson and how valuable this is, and this is going to be pretty valuable for Phillip Rivers when we're talking about a guy that, didn't really have a lot of mobility to begin with, but is another year older. Quentin Nelson, how he gets depth on his pass sets, and he's not just going to be looking for a guy to lay out at the line of scrimmage right in front of him and say, okay, my job's done, when a center has already got a guy covered. What he's going to do is, if he sees that he needs to search for work and he's looking for work, he's going to get extra depth. And as a left guard, he's going to be searching and he's going to be looking over by the right side of the offensive line and the right tackle. And he's going to see if that edge rusher on that right side is come through, he's going to lay him out. And he's going to go over there, he's going to search for work. He's almost going to cross the line of scrimmage on a pass play to look for work and help out the guy on that side. So he's such a smart, instinctual football player, and he's been doing it since he stepped onto the football field. So, Colts arguably he's a Hall of Fame pace, Quentin Nelson. He's just very, very fun to watch. And also another guy from that 2018 draft. Both Quentin Nelson and DeForest Buckner, guys that I really wish were on the Giants. Partially why I wanted that assistant GM because he was a part of that process. A fun group to look at. It's just a matter. Talked about this with the Bills a little bit. All about quarterback. How can the quarterback produce, and how can the quarterback be a value for a football team?
And it's Ed Dodds, by the way, is the assistant general manager of the Indianapolis Colts. But I think the Bills and the Patriots this year. Before I get started with them, I think the Jets are kind of in your same position where, look, this year's a development year for them. We'll see what Sam Darnold progress is. I think the Adams thing, even though he's an all-pro player, I think getting rid of him may benefit them in the long run, where it's like, hey, if you think he's a problem in the locker room, it's good to get him out of there. Also, if he didn't want to be there, just say sayonara. And then with the Miami Dolphins, I think they can be good, but at the same time, too, I would not be shocked if they got out of the gate a little, or if not off to a cold start, but if they did it exactly, what's the word I'm looking for here? If they seemed like they overachieved last year. So if this year, if they seem like they do the same, everyone's going to go, oh, are they taking a step back? No, I don't think they're taking a step back. I think it's just, look, it's the same thing where we don't know what we're going to get if it's Fitzpatrick or if it's Tua. And then with the Patriots and the Bills, I think you're going to see a lot of the same as last year from the Patriots, where they win some ugly, 16-10, 13-9, 14-10 style football games.
Yeah. I the point that you made on Jamal Adams, because I've been very, very strong on saying this point, especially when you compare it to the Odell Beckham Jr. situation. I naturally do that just as a Giants fan. Jamal Adams, not only was he having and now granted the Jets don't do a great job of this either, of investing in their draft picks once it's time for them to be paid. The Jets would much rather sign all-pro players or trade for all in their mid-30s, cough, cough, Ed Reed, cough, cough, Daniel Tomlinson. Isn't Frank Gore on the Jets right now?
Yes, he is.
I mean, just all these crazy moves that they make, cough, cough, Brett Favre. All these moves they make with all-pro players in their mid-30s, yet they choose not to pay all-pro players coming off of their rookie deals. But Jamal Adams, he was really running his mouth. He was really talking a lot. And also, the thing with Jamal Adams, obviously Odell Beckham Jr. sat down with Josina Anderson and Lil Wayne and kind of digged Eli Manning and Pat Shurmur a little bit. No, Jamal Adams not only not only did that, did a little dig at his own franchise, he did a tell-all with the beat reporter. A couple days before he was traded, he did a tell-all exclusive with one of the Jets beat reporters. So, and the fact that Odell Beckham Jr. I'm going on a rant. The fact that a guy like Odell is criticized for doing so much little things in comparison to what other guys do, the fact that Jamal Adams can get ripped to shreds for doing a tell-all and doing a big FU tour before he was traded, he didn't get ripped apart for that, it blows my mind. But I like how the Jets got I know a lot of people want to debate, did they actually get 2 firsts back since it's technically an early second-round pick? It's 2 firsts in my opinion. I think the Jets are in prime position to possibly move up in this year's draft if they want to. If they want to leverage some of these first-round picks that they have and move up depending on how good they do this year. They also depending on how bad they do this year, they can also try back in this year's draft and get a ton more draft picks. So, I think the Jets are in a funky spot. Again, we're talking about, how good can Darnold do if that offensive line can hold up. I think Becton was the worst out of those offensive tackle prospects. I think, you look at that 40 time and you get excited, but what is a lineman besides going to celebrate in the end zone on pass plays? So I think the size is a little worrisome. The weight's a little worrisome to me at the NFL level. And if we're expecting Mekhi Becton to be the franchise left tackle, and you take him in the first round, I'm feeling a little uneasy about that. Definitely feeling a little uneasy about that. And also, I know we were talking about the Dolphins too. I love their grit. I love the grit of that team, that somehow with an XFL and NFL roster that they had, and defensive coordinator Patrick Graham and that offense over there led by Fitzpatrick, Brian Flores did an awesome job of leading that team last year. They fought for everything. They didn't give up. The turnover that roster would have week in and week out throughout the second half of the season, shocking to see. But they're a fun story. I'm definitely rooting for them this year.
The other point I want to make about the Jets too is for as long as Adam Gase is their head coach, I have zero confidence in them being a winning organization. That's the only thing I want to say. Like, some people are made to be head coaches and some aren't. Some examples, we have obviously Todd Bowles, Pat Shurmur, guys like that. They're not made to be head coaches, and they're good coordinators.
No, absolutely. I'm 100% with you on that. You see it. Giants all too well about offensive coordinators that aren't supposed to be head coaches, so we're with you in that.
And the only other points I want to make about the AFC East quickly, if there was another team to pick that could kind of, I don't want to say dark horse, but could kind of surprise people, because obviously we have the Baltimores and the Kansas Cities. We know that's probably 1, 2, and then 3 through 7 pretty much is like a fill in the blanks. Is the LA Chargers. If they can stay healthy, I think they can make some noise in the AFC West. I'm not saying they're going to win. Obviously, there's a $500 million quarterback who pretty much owns that division for the next 10 to 12 years. But the LA Chargers are, Vegas is, even Vegas and Denver, they intrigue me, but there's still something missing with those two organizations. But LA, I think Justin Herbert could be a stud.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Herbert at all, and part of the reason why I'm not sold is, unlike now Joe Burrow, his growth was exponential. Joe Burrow got better, and you were able to see, well, this guy got better, from year to year. Justin Herbert is a guy that I don't really feel has improved much throughout his years, and I think he had every opportunity to show that he improved, especially when you choose to stay for your senior year, which, by the way, I will never understand why quarterbacks, and I believe Matt Barkley did the same thing himself, where he was the number 1 pick his junior season, and I guess, if you feel that you're not ready, but you're still taking such a huge risk of you you're going to be the number 1 pick. You're going to be the first quarterback taken off the board, and the fact that you choose to go back to school, I think it's such a head-scratching move. Obviously, if you want to make moves personally and you want to get your degree, I'm not going to hate you at that. But I mean, it's a difference between millions and millions of dollars, even if you're talking about maybe the number 1 pick and number 5 pick, where Herbert was selected. I'm not sold on him. I can we see Tyrod Taylor roll? I know we want to see Herbert. That's going to be a much better story, but you kind of feel bad. It's like Tyrod Taylor. He had an opportunity with the Bills, and then he goes to the Browns. So, all right, the Browns, may or may not draft. I think it was clear that they were going to draft Baker. It was going to be a quarterback competition. Is he ready? Blah blah blah. Tyrod Taylor gets benched, even though I feel like he wasn't that terrible. And then again, he's coming into a situation with the rookie quarterback. So I kind of feel bad for Tyrod. And I said this a couple minutes back about just the Chargers roster. I feel like they have a decent roster. And this was even last year, heading into 2018, I was expecting them to make a little noise, and it kind of just fell apart on them. So I think even the Raiders improved. I love the Raiders' offensive line. So I guess if there's a team that we're going to choose to fall off, maybe Drew Lock doesn't have that second-year jump because he technically didn't even have a full rookie season to begin with. So maybe they take that step back. That roster, that team kind of goes down from 7 wins maybe we see the Chargers pull out an extra 2-3 wins this year to finish in second or third place, possibly maybe even get that extra wild card spot, and the Broncos are the team that takes that step down.
And also, too, with the Broncos, because I just feel like Vic Fangio's a good head coach. I just feel like you need to get an offensive guy in there, because like you've got Phillip Lindsay, you've got Drew Lock, you've got Cortland Sutton, you've got Jerry Jeudy, you've got KJ Hamler. You have all these offensive weapons. Meanwhile, you got Vic, who's a defensive guy, very old school mentality. I only say that too because he's in his sixth season. He's a rookie, second year head coach. So that's why I say with Denver, like I still don't believe in them now. It's just it was kind of sad that the 4 seasons they had a world class defense that pretty much went to waste.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, what you do have to love, if you're a Broncos fan, I am pretty certain that Pat Shurmur wanted Drew Lock. I'm pretty certain that Drew Lock was Pat Shurmur's guy that he was targeting in that 2019 draft, and obviously, the Giants chose to go with Daniel Jones because the way that the Giants worked, it's very much a hierarchical way of organizing themselves as a franchise. The owner does owner things. The owner does influence himself in football decisions. The general manager, he's going to make the personnel decisions, but the coach, he's expected to coach the football team and kind of shut up from there. He'll give his input. He can maybe give what he recommends, but I think it's really, really rare that the Giants front office management is going to be listening to those coaches, because even Ben McAdoo wanted Patrick Mahomes, and we said no. So there's that. So apparently, him and quarterback coach Mike Sullivan, they really do love Drew Lock. They were together in New York working with Daniel Jones. We saw the good things that they were able to do with Daniel Jones with kind of a crummy situation. Now Shurmur, all that he's doing now, he's just calling the plays. He's not expected to manage a team. And he gets a guy that he arguably likes better than Daniel Jones.
And before we go, there's one other thing I want to say. I think Cleveland's in a similar situation to Denver where I don't know what Cleveland. I don't know what we're going to get out of them. And Cincinnati too. I think Cincinnati's still going to be probably a top 5 draft team this year, but I think Burrow does have offensive rookie of the year potential.
Oh, absolutely. And the reason why is if he still has the confidence to throw the ball down the field. Because if there's one thing that I feel like maybe possibly doesn't change from the college level to the pro level, it's your accuracy. Obviously your mental processing, I think that all goes with your confidence, your decision making. That's going to be a transition from the pro level to the next. But I don't think you could teach accuracy and God-given arm talent. And sure, Joe Burrow, he may not have a Josh Allen arm, may not have a Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers arm, but the accuracy and the touch that we would see these balls, with LSU and these otherworldly wide receivers also to begin with, but also pretty good set of wide receivers he has now. Tyler Boyd coming off of consecutive 1,000-yard receiving seasons, very underrated wide receiver. He's on a mission to prove to the National Football League that he deserves more respect. A.J. Green's really hoping to stay healthy. So, even if that defense and that team as a whole is playing behind in a lot of games, that may benefit Joe Burrow's stat in terms of his potential to be offensive rookie of the year, because they're going to be throwing the ball. They're going to be throwing the ball left and right. So Burrow's accuracy, if he can still have that confidence to throw the ball down the field and to push the ball down the field, maybe not even lofting at 20-plus yards, but staying within throwing that 10 to 19-yard range, if he can continue to do that, I really think that a lot of people are going to be surprised by what Burrow can do with this offense and how much he can do. It's not a surprise, because I really don't think you don't lose that accuracy. I don't think that you necessarily lose from the college to the pro level, and you have to kind of gain it back. It's the mental side of the game. But the Cleveland Browns, gosh, what a team! what a team! If you're a Yankee fan, I compared them to the New Jersey Devils. The Cleveland Browns are kind of like the same, where they always have these. They also the Dallas Cowboys too. They always have these expectations year in and year out. Oh, this is going to be the year, especially this year, past year for the Devils if you're a hockey fan. But they're going to great team. They're going to put it all together. They're going to make the play. They go on a run, and then it was just crap. It was terrible. Now I think you like the situation a little bit better, possibly with Stefanski. And we talked about that early on in the podcast as well, where there could be some other more qualified guys that they could have gone after. But definitely Freddie Kitchens was not ready a head coach. Freddie Kitchens is the tight end coach for the New York Giants right now. So his fall from grace was pretty spectacular. But this is also what happens. Like the Cleveland Cavaliers would listen to LeBron James and make LeBron James the general manager. The Cleveland Browns also listened to Baker Mayfield and made him the general manager and hired Freddie Kitchens right away without doing a proper head coaching search. So it's going to be interesting to see, even if Odell Beckham Jr. stays healthy. I know a lot of Giants fans that are really not rooting for the success of the Browns because Bakefield kind of talked trash about Daniel Jones last summer. A lot of people are still feeling not good about Odell Beckham Jr. and how he departed, even though it was a trade and the organization made that choice, not him. But I'm rooting for him. I'm rooting for Beckham. I'm rooting to get it together. I'm rooting for him. I think the Browns being good and Odell being good is the league.
You nailed it on the head, and I just wanted to look up one quick thing. Look for Week 15, December 20th, also known as my birthday, for when the Cleveland Browns pay a visit to MetLife Stadium. And also, to answer another question of yours, Justin, I actually am from Toronto, Canada, so yes, I am a very depressed hockey fan. But, guys, I'm going to say, Justin, that was a fantastic conversation with you and I had for the last hour and a half. Thank you very much for coming on. I hope you had a good time, man.
No, Griff, I mean, part of what I think this was awesome is, even though I talked for the majority of it, and that's usually how interviews go, I still feel like this was pretty conversational, and I certainly learned a lot from you. You're a very, very smart all-around football fan. I'm obviously a lot more niche with my Just Giants crowd, and I'm trying to, as a young fan myself, I'm trying to, get more into the NFL sphere, but you're a smart guy, you're a knowledgeable guy. I hope you continue with this podcasting thing. Hope you continue to diversify your content. I know you were telling me you're also a WWE podcast, so continue grinding. Enjoy football, enjoy sports. So hopefully you stay safe. Hopefully all our favorite athletes stay safe, and we can have a safe, a healthy, and competitive, and an awesome season. So thank you very much for having me on.
No problem. Thank you very much for all of that. And I just got to say one more quick thing. Can you just shout out, for those of you who do not know about Justin's podcast, can you please shout out what it's called and where you can find it?
Yeah, so pretty much we're up on all podcast apps. Talkin Giants, at Talkin Giants on Twitter, at Talkin Giants on Instagram. I also have a Giants history podcast. It's called Bleeding Blue. So if you're a football fan and you want to, just catch every once in a while, me and my buddy, his name is Snack. His nickname is Snack, not his real name. But me and my buddy Snacks, once a week, talk about Giants history, and we talk some old stories. We watch games together, so that's a lot of fun. I feel like there's not a lot of podcast there for certain teams that is solely centered around the team's history. It's not about the everyday Giants, so it was a little bit of a passion project. Giants fan and you want to hear everyday Giants news, Talkin Giants is where it's at. During camp and up until game week, we're posting 5 days a week. 2 times a week it's a regular episode, and then 3 times a week we're doing our player profile and projection series where we're talking about individual players. So, Griff, once again, thank you for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
No problem. Thank you very much for coming on, Justin. And that will do it for today, guys, for episode 21 of the YWC Football Podcast. You know where to find me. Keep on listening, guys. Episodes will be coming more and more frequently now that... Justin, I heard you say this on Instagram. Can you say the phrase for me right now?
Oh, football's a contact sport, and football's back, baby.
You heard it there first. I'm going to be pumping out more episodes. Why? Because in 2 weeks from now, we're kicking off the 2020 NFL season. But anyway, guys, like I always say, stay safe, continue social distance, wash your hands. Good night for now, guys. Thank you very much for listening.